everybody, this is Meg Kelly. How y'all doing? I'm going to talk about some patterns and perceptions that are in fairy tales about the villain. So my two parts are the abilities, or maybe the powers, or maybe superpowers of villains, and also the origin of the story. So I have two actual texts with me, but I'm going to talk about a couple more books. The first book I'm going to talk about is Rumpelstiltskin, which is a fun fairy tale about a young girl who her father, for some reason, tells the king that she can turn hay into gold when she actually can't. So the king says, let's see it. So he takes her to the castle and puts her in a room with a bunch of hay, and she can't do it. So this little guy named Rumpelstiltskin shows up and says, oh, he can do that if she'll give him something. And at night after night, she has to give him something, and finally she doesn't have anything left to give, so he says, well, I would like your firstborn child. That's pretty rough. So she says yes, thinking that's not going to happen. Turns out she gets married to the king, is pregnant with his child. Rumpelstiltskin shows up once the baby's born. So here's the story. Basically, his ability is he can turn hay into gold. And I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end, because that's, I think, Ada's doing that. So some other books that we looked at that I don't have in front of me right now is Robin Hood. In that story, the Sheriff of Nottingham is the villain, per se. He doesn't technically have any superpowers. He oppresses people, and Robin Hood works to end that oppression. Some other books that we read are Beauty and the Beast. There's a witch in that story who casts a spell. There's a lot of the stories that we looked at have witches. Here's Hansel and Gretel that Andrew looked at. In this story, it's a witch, and she has a house deep in the woods, and when children get lost in the woods, she takes them in, locks them up, and feeds them food, trying to fatten them up so she can cook them and eat them. That's not very nice. Some other stories we looked at were in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's also a witch. Her powers are she can turn people and animals to stone. She also oppresses people. She oppresses animals too, but in Narnia, animals and people are equal. She's able to talk to trees, things like that. So those are pretty heavy-duty powers. Another book we looked at, sorry, let me just look at my notes really quick. We looked at two different versions of Rapunzel. Both have witches in them that are the villainous character. One was the kind of the Rapunzel that maybe you've seen in a Disney movie or something similar to that, and the other one is a Caribbean version of Rapunzel, which is the title is Sugar Cane. And in that book, she's more of a sorceress, which is similar to a witch but a little bit different, and her powers is that she can make hurricanes, it says that she can make sharks dance, she can move very quickly throughout the islands there in the Caribbean. So some pretty crazy powers that I know make me a little bit nervous. I don't know about you. A lot of the origins, the first time a lot of these stories, like Hansel and Gretel, and other stories were written down, the Three Little Pigs were written down by the Brothers Grimm in what's now known as today as Germany. At that time I don't think it was Germany yet, but that's where they were from. I don't know if that's where technically those stories all came from, but that was the first recorded time they were written down. So many of these stories were written down for the first time, probably by the Brothers Grimm. Some of the stories come from other places, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written by C.S. Lewis, who's from England, and that story kind of has some, it's known as a Christ allegory. Aslan, the heroic character in that story, is seen as a Christ figure. He gives up his life for others, and that's kind of it. So that's kind of the origins of the stories. Most of them were written down in Europe. I don't know if that's where they first came from. That would, I'd like to look into that a little bit more maybe. And yeah, so they have some pretty crazy powers. So thanks so much, and see you soon.